Hello everyone, this is Living Dead, and I am back with another WAD playthrough. This one is a user submission from the Doomworld forums. A user named TheGreenZap messaged me and asked me to play this map, and so I thought I'd give it a try. It is called Alpha King, and it is this person's first WAD. So let's see how they done on their first try at it. We are playing GZ Doom Ultraviolence. Let's do strict. Yeah, boom, strict is good. Oh. Alright, let's see what we got going on here. Very nice. Okay. Interesting. Cool little opening here. So we are dealing with 127 monsters and 1 secret. Should be in and out pretty quick. But, yeah, that's cool. I like that little, like, opening ambush. You think you're gonna just pistol a couple of imps and grab this shotgun, and then these shotgunners kind of step out from beyond these pillars and surprise you. So that's pretty cool. Texturing in this room's a little bit basic, but it definitely eschews... Ooh, what's this? It eschews the problem of just being, like, kind of boringly rectangular, at least. So that's good. You know, the author's definitely paying attention to some geometry in this, and you got some nice signs of things like some slightly different elevation. Neat little attempt to make this, well, let's say this is a little awkward looking skylight, but it's a nice attempt at detail here. So I want to know what's going on with this. So I can see this line here on the auto map, but I don't know what that means. So let's just oh, okay. Oh shit, that is not something I expected at all. So let's get out of this room. Shit, okay, grab this health, and let's go back into this room and get some cover. Grab the stem. Oh, actually it would have been nice for that guy to do a little damage to that Mancubus, but oh well. Lesson learned. Let's see, let's go ahead and do a little save. What is this called? Alpha King. Oh no. Oh man, a lot of chain gunners here. Kind of ruining my stuff. Okay. Kind of deserve that. Okay. Establishing a small amount of a foothold, although these imps are just going to continue to pester me. Let's get this guy. Bit of a wide open space. It's just feels a little big for the monster density in this area, but I don't know, maybe it will turn into something different a little bit later. But if this doesn't fill up with monsters later, then this space will probably just feel a little bit egregiously large. Okay, but I mean, outside of that, some nice, I like the area setup. So, we can talk about, like, visual detailing itself here in a little bit. I'm not interested in getting into that too much right now. What I do want to note here is I like, generally, kind of the way this space is designed. I like this nice contrast between this indoor area and then this kind of, like, covered outdoor area, and then this outdoor area, and then it's, you know, it's got a nice little kind of I guess, degree of connectivity. This looks like it's gonna go off into something else, and we got another part of the base over here, and then, but you know, you can see like a nice little space. It's gonna connect back. I start to wonder how that's gonna work. So, oh. Oh. Always gotta listen for that explosion. Yeah. So what do you have here? Oh, a hit. Okay. Cool. All right. I like that it's sort of a little one-way path, kind of like makes you commit to it. Got to be ready for that. Cool little geometric detailing here going on in this area. So it's not just a very boring kind of copy-pasted texture like flood fill. It's some cool little support structures here. So detailing wise though, so here's where you want to look for some things. Is like when you're going to transition the texture like this, you'd actually want to use a texture like this, or like the door, not the door track, but like the silver texture, metal texture, and just put a vertex like 16 units offset right here, and make this texture right here. Probably do it here too, just to give it some continuity. And then one thing you could do is lower the height of this, and you just kind of give it just a little bit of a visual touch-up, so it looks a little better. So, but I like this kind of interesting cavernous type of space here. It's a very, very strong commitment to making this not boringly rectangular. Okay, so now we're gonna go up some stairs here and back to start. Okay, cool. So that's how this connects back together. Yeah, I like having to. I like that you get to see the path backward, or back to this starting area before you get to it. So that's cool. All right, so now we are going in this direction. Bit of an awkward angular hallway. You don't have to necessarily make everything non-rectangular. It's just I think it really starts to become a problem is when like all your spaces look rectangular, but it's okay to make some of them look that way. What's in here? Anything? Ambush then. Okay, so if this turns out to be an ambush, then one thing you want to do with this line dev here is highlight that in Doom Builder, and I guess older versions, maybe it's like secret or hide from automap, but if it's Ultimate Doom Builder, you want to tell it it's one-sided, and then it will show up like exterior line defs, so it does not give away the fact that this door will open in some way. Of course, if you want to make that a secret that's easy to find, then that's a cool way to kind of signal it. Oh. I think the, ooh. Got a pain elemental here to deal with. Come over a little closer. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Oh. Could totally see how that would get out of hand if you do not kind of run into both of those rooms at the same time. Or if you do, I mean, you know, you come in here and you're like, oh no, and you go over here. You wake all these monsters up at once. It can be pretty nasty. If you don't do that, though, it's fairly manageable. So, okay. So, I feel like these areas... So, it's a nice attempt to kind of theme these different areas and vary the textures and vary the shapes. And lighting especially, there's some good attention to lighting here. But where this would strongly benefit from... Let me kill this Baron first. Where this would strongly benefit is if we start thinking about... So you're even doing things like adjusting the height of the floor. But where this would go a little bit of a longer way is if you start varying the height of the ceiling too. So from here, aside from the lights, this room all the way into this room, 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 maybe even in other rooms, it's all the same height. And I think you can get away with... So one thing too is that there's a lot of just odd geometry to this. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but like, in my opinion, this texture doesn't feel like a natural formation type of texture. So it's just slightly odd to have this kind of more natural shape to the geometry of this sort of like outer area, right? And so, you know, you would think like, well, okay, so if I make it rectangular instead of this natural looking geometry, then the room is going to be boring because it's just going to look like the same shape as this room. And that's kind of true. But if you alter the height of these, you're doing a lot of a good contrast between like these little tight claustrophobic areas and these kind of more like open areas. But you could get away with not having to make the rooms maybe as awkwardly shaped if you play with the contrast, the claustrophobia and the openness by also adjusting, you know, the height of the ceiling as another axis of manipulation. So just a few things to think about there. Okay, so let's see what comes up next. Oh, see, okay, so I called it. I just heard that door open. And who's in here? These guys. Okay, so I was fully expecting that to happen. Still haven't found this one secret in the level. Okay. Oh. Oh, that creepy little flashing light here. See, like another classic example is basically from here all the way into here, all the way into here, all the way into here, all the way into here. The ceiling is all the same height. And you can make the areas feel a lot more varied without doing a whole lot of extra work if you just vary the height of the ceiling a little bit. Especially the transition areas. So like, you know, you could get away with a little bit like of having this area and this area the same height. But then this sort of like transitionary hallway, if you just drop this down, it just kind of makes it just kind of, you know, leads a little bit more to the feeling of it being like a transitionary area. So, anyways, okay, let's see if I can figure out how to get this rocket launcher. That is another, oh, so something I can activate from all the way over here by accident. And again, another case where I just saw the secret door on the auto map, so I just tried to press it. And now if I come back this way, oh! I almost didn't even notice that. Cool, I'll take it. Oh shit. Oh no. Thought there was going to be more to hide behind. Okay, cool. Neat little throne here. I like the sector geometry like this. It's very like 90s Doom. It reminds me of like when I was a kid playing Doom, and you didn't see stuff like this in an id map, you know, like an iWAD. So then you turn around and you download a map off of AOL or whatever, and you see this, and you're like, oh wow, people make these levels so detailed looking. I don't mean that in a condescending way either. It's very endearing to me. So, alright, that is the exit, presumably. Okay. 100% all the way through. What I will do here is reload real fast, and let's just take a little walk through the level. So, I'm going to try to structure this critique on a couple of different tiers, just starting with some basic things, and then let's just kind of work our way up. Think about level design in a more holistic approach, I guess, or a higher level. So, TheGreenZap, there's definitely makes a lot of good, not attempts, because attempts makes it seem like it implies kind of like a failure. There's good implementation of nice altering between, you know, visuals and attempts to detail with actual 3D geometry. Some of these things, like, you know, I think, like, if this texture looks good with this texture, it's going to come down to some personal preference. But these types of things are where, you know, a lot of more modern Doom maps will employ things like border textures. You know, it's either going to be a border texture right here. It's about 16 units wide and 16 units wide. Like this texture would be a perfect border texture here. And, you know, so you would start to see things like that, or like border textures here in the doorways. Like the door track is good, but then you can kind of take it one step further and make this a border texture as well. The light texture is really good for that, and then it allows you to do things like play with the sector lighting of the doorway if you want to. It just gives it a little bit of a different you know, contrast to it. Other things to consider would be making the door ceiling and the actual room ceiling different textures, so you just get a little bit more variation that way as well. I generally though like the you know, the endeavor to keep this geometrically visually interesting. One thing that I tend to point out very frequently in kind of more novice maps and is that rooms look way too rectangular, just squares, and one thing that happens with that is that, like, the rooms just feel like a square room can just feel like a linear path. That's all it is. So you go into the hallway, or it's a rectangle, and you just walk down the hallway and you are at the end of it, and you fight the monsters in between, and that's really all that you do. It's just an obstacle that prevents you from going directly from A to B. And so I encourage people to think about designing the geometry of the room in a more 3D or flow, you know, don't just think of it as a rectangle or a square. And this map seems to very much kind of be cognizant of the fact that making rectangles and squares is kind of boring. But one thing I would say is that, like, you know, having a zigzag shaped hallway is a little bit odd, especially if you're going for like kind of a tech-based theme. And so, you know, ways that you can vary the, you know, this being just a linear path is you can think about, without having to just make, like, you know, a zigzag, like you can make it a rectangle quote unquote shape overall. But what, you know, things you can do is you can give the space a little bit of a flow to it. So, you know, maybe there is like two lanes that you go down, and there's monsters that come down one lane that like sort of push you down the other lane, but then the end of that other lane, maybe there's, you know, like a mancubus or something. So there's some decision making to do, and it's or you know, some way that you can kind of move about the space where it's not just like enter the room, kill the monsters in the middle of the room, walk to the end of the room. That's the real big thing you're trying to avoid by remembering that you don't want everything to be rectangular. But you can have rectangular spaces without allowing that to happen constantly. So that's just something to think about. I would also say, you know, like rooms like this one, you know, where you just kind of flood fill. It depends on what kind of aesthetic you're going for, right? Because sometimes you're like, I want this to kind of look more like a classic Doom, and having more flood filled type of areas is fine in that capacity. If your intent is to go for, you know, what people would consider like modern expectations for visuals while still using classic textures, that's when you're going to want to start thinking about things more in terms of like detailed geometry. So, you know, where like instead of this thing just being a straight up square shape, maybe it has some indentations in it and allows for you to use more textures than just this one. So it'll have kind of like a not like an octagon shape, but like if you can imagine like a slightly recessed rectangle, like where this is pointing and where this is pointing and where this is pointing and where that is, you know, on the other side. It's just as an example. Having that kind of like geometric detailing can then allow you to employ textural detailing, or you can add some vertices to your line def. So like put, you know, one offset 16 or 32 here, one offset 16 or 32 here, and then you have some cool border textures and then a nice little middle texture. So, you know, just things like that. If you're going to go for if you want some suggestions on how to get a little bit more modern type of detailing, but this room especially, I really like it a lot, and the reason why is there's a lot of things going on. When you first enter this room, you've got a mancubus that kind of wanders around and gets you, some chain gunners that keep you from really coming deep into this room, and with the shotgun, you know, your incentive is like, I need to get into this room and get close to anything that I want to kill. But you can't really do that very easily because the chain gunner's here, and I believe there's one perched back here and back here. They kind of pin you in this room here and prevent that from happening very well. And so when, you know, like the mancubus shows up and the imps are shooting fireballs at you with the double barrel shotgun, you really just want to get into this room, and the chain gunners kind of prevent that from happening. And then, you know, you have some cool stuff like the perches for the imps to be on, and the fact that there's perches out here and these different platforms as well. This is a good example of like some decisions to make in the space. And so if you think about like compare this type of space, when I say like don't make it rectangular, you know, you could say, well, this is basically a rectangle, but this space, you know, begets a lot of different decisions to make, and there's a lot of interacting with the layout of the space to engage with the combat. You know, I could come in here and maybe I want to run away from the chain gunner, and I just try to run up and get this guy real fast and this guy real fast, and then I hide from the other chain gunners here, and then mancubus, you know, shoots me and forces me back up in this direction, you know, something like that. What I'm getting at is that, you know, there's a lot of non-linear ways to move around this space. It's a fairly basic shape, and that's good, and that's the kind of stuff that I would recommend being cognizant of. With that being said, the space also kind of has a unique, interesting problem where it's just very like large and kind of expansive, and either there's two things you could probably do. If you're only intended to just come through here and kill everything in it just once, probably just make it a little smaller, because it's just a little weird and not that interesting to just have this big open area. Or grab the red key down here. Once you drop back down or something, you know, maybe some cacodemons show up, or a horde of monsters spawns in here, and it kind of recontextualizes this space. It becomes a much more appropriate arena for a more dangerous fight that happens later on in the level. And then it has kind of the double effect of, when you're thinking about like the drama of the level, if the player comes in here and is like, why is this space so big? Does this mean I'm going to have to fight something later? You're kind of planting that seed of anticipation in the player's mind, right? You're like foreshadowing a little bit, so that when this does happen later on, it kind of surprises them, but it also kind of confirms their concerns. But that's a fun thing to have happen to you as a player, when you make a guess about what's going to happen in the level, and then it comes true, and not in like an example of where that's like slightly less interesting is when I just kind of find out that this is going to be a trap by seeing that this line def is not hidden, and then realize when I pick up the key, I'm going to come back through here and I'm going to be ambushed. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. What I mean is, I think there's just a little bit, something more interesting about the fact that it's like, oh wow, that's what this space was all about, is that there was this big fight here that I wondered if it was going to happen. So yeah, just some things to think about here. I think a lot of the texture detailing is decent, and seems to be the kind of thing that will improve with experience and experimentation. The fact that there is this degree, like using these two textures together is fairly, a wise decision to make, because they complement each other very well. The colors do and the shape does. And so it's not just slapdash. And there's some nice attempts at geometric detailing, like this stuff going on up here. This, pretty effective. So the kind of things that will happen with practice is just getting good at making these look even better than it does. Or, maybe having the thought of something like how this is cool, there's this cool little like flickering ominous light, but then you kind of just have this one singular texture that's like, I guess it's kind of the light source, and you're just kind of like, well, why aren't the rest of these lit up or something? It does get a little bit sort of linear at some points too, where it's just like, you're kind of just opening the door and killing the guys in the room, and then just killing the guys in the room, and then just kind of killing the guys in the room. I think again, this room out here is a really good example of like how you can make cool combat spaces, and you can think about trying to like incorporate multiple spaces like that in the level. Going down into the sewer here is another example of, like there's a lot of linear spaces, and then you kind of lead into this one area, and there's a lot of interesting things where you can kind of go these branching paths. That's a good example of making the space not perfectly linear. It's a lot more interesting that way. So yeah, I mean, I'd say for a first map, this is a pretty solid effort. Took the author a little bit of time to make it, and there's probably a good learning curve, like how do the tools work? How do I kind of incorporate some more interesting elements into the design? I think what I would probably focus on just as a few key takeaways would be, probably try to think about how you can make, like, this is a cool little visual area, and how you can make areas that look more like this without having to rely on like weird zigzags, and just continue to kind of find ways to touch up the texturing visuals. Again, like how this looks good by having this kind of like border texture here. You can use border textures like in all kinds of other ways. It's really crucial when very different textures touch each other. So like this here, perfect place to use a border texture. And then you can also just consider like border geometry. So take it one step further and go in multiple dimensions with the way you do that. I actually thought, the fights were pretty interesting. There was a lot of cool places where like hit scanners ambush you. The enemies kind of prioritize which ones you go after. I'd say this is probably maybe the area of the map that's maybe the least exciting in just terms of, it's just kind of basically to the end of the map. You're just kind of going to the end and just fighting all the monsters at the end. Cool little showdown with the Archvile here. Archvile works pretty effectively when there is a reason to either prioritize killing him or have to hide from him because you don't have what you need or you can't get where you need to kill him. Having him just kind of packed in the back of a few monsters can be kind of effective, but by this time, you're fairly well stocked as a player, and killing the meat shields here is not too hard to just get the Archvile and get him. So, you would want to consider ways to, like, if you open the door and the Archvile's here with a couple of pinkies, and then, maybe a couple of barons are here or something, and then it's like, well, or, there's a baron here and there's a baron here, and then it's like, well, last thing you want to do is get into a room with an Archvile, but maybe that's the only way you're going to survive, and then, the trick becomes, how do you deal with this encounter? So, those are the few things that I would probably consider here. I think TheGreenZap is off to a nice start as a map maker, and I think with a little bit more experience, there's going to be some pretty good quality things that come out. So looking forward to seeing what's next. that is my take on this one. I appreciate everybody tuning in again, as always. And until the next video, I hope you take care. Have a good one.